With profit and privatization, there's a great concern that someone's going to head this company or companies come away and they're going to be leaking money from the council and we're going to be worse off as residents somewhere. I've always been concerned that in some way there may be some elements within the council as it is where we are employing contractors or whatnot and they are coming along trying to provide us with services, developments and so on. However, they're the ones leaving with a check and we're left with a service which is maybe substandard. So profiteering can actually happen within the current model, and that's something that I've been currently concerned about myself. As a housing association or other combination, whichever recommendation we may make, I feel that there really isn't a situation where that might be where profit is led to or privatization is led to. Also, an earlier point from early in the afternoon, we didn't really mention that there may be a partial transfer where the recommendation may be made for some parts of the borough to go for transfer and others to remain, because not all boroughs are going to be the same, not parts of the borough are going to be the same. We have seen some boroughs where they're completely different from ours and others where they're more alike, and some models may suit different parts of the borough, so partial transfer is one other thing which I think wasn't mentioned earlier on. Also, just one point about the layman's terms. I live in I'm a tenant that lives in a street property, and I really haven't been in the past been involved in things like TRAs, and a lot of this is very new to me. And in terms of things like glossaries, I've asked for these things, and I'm taking in pretty much the same rate as you guys do. And I think it'll be a really important idea for you guys before any kind of service you take, you get as much information as we do. I'd really strongly recommend that. As much as you can, try to go on a website and take down as much information as you can, and also do as much research as you can before you make any decisions. Do not do it on gut feeling. Make sure that any decisions you make are informed. One other thing I was going to say, and I think I've lost it. I'll leave it at that until it comes back.
It'll come back to you. I'm going to wind up this session shortly. No, if you just bear with me, sir. I'm going to go to the gentleman at the back who I said I'd come back to, and then we may have a couple of questions at the front. Well, let's just see whether we have. Sir, do you want to come back on? I interrupted you a little bit when we were talking about CPOs. Did you want to come back on that?
Oh, sorry. I'm not a tenant anyway. I'm a leaseholder, and I've come to see basically what this is all about, really. I was just making a point that the lady's probably got a good point when she worries about if a compulsory purchase is made, will she be made a housing association tenant? I could say I took your point on board, but what about when they compulsory purchase the A40? That sort of thing could be likely to happen when it comes to Crossrail. And in fact, they didn't even do anything with the 840 properties anyway, did they? But those people would have been rehoused somewhere else. And her point is it would be with a housing association and not a council. That's the point I was going to make. I'm not here to make that point per se, because I'm here as a leaseholder. But I think I'll probably come to a couple more meetings before I get a grip of what's going on, really.
Okay, thank you very much for that. If it's okay, I think we'll note that point and move on to what I think will be the final question. So, Mr. Ryan.
Could I ask Peter, is it still possible to set up an estate management board? Say a TRA, a resident association, wished to set one up in this day and age. Is that still possible?
As far as I'm aware, it certainly is possible, and we will, in fact, just for interest, on Thursday of this week, when we have our seventh public hearing, I correct myself, seventh public hearing, the theme is resident involvement. And one of the people who we hope will be attending as a witness is the head of resident involvement at the London Borough of Southwark, where there are a number of estates that are subject to tenant management agreements or estate management agreements with the local authority. So there's an agreement where the council allows a tenant board to undertake certain functions, management functions for their estate, without taking over the ownership. Ownership remains with the council, tenant body carries out certain management functions. Kensington and Chelsea, they do it on a borough-wide basis. In Southwark and a lot of other local authorities, there are individual estates or groups of properties which are subject to that, and that is still an option.
Kensington and Chelsea have an EMB next to West.
They do indeed. So in Kensington and Chelsea, the borough-wide management is carried out by a tenant management organisation that's borough-wide, but within that, there's also at least one estate management board that manages their own estate by an agreement with the council.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm really sorry. We've had a whole load of really great questions, but I'm very conscious of the time. And I'm going to move us on to the other parts of the agenda because there's some I'm going to ask you to leave that question, sir, because I'm going to move on to I'm going to move on to the next part of the agenda.
The very important part of the question is that
the next. Sir, could I ask you not to disrupt?
The government has withdrawn legal aid in the housing part of.
Sir, I'm going to ask you not to disrupt the meeting further. You've had your opportunity to ask a question. I think you've had a response to that. So I'm going to take us on. I'm going to take us on to the next part of the meeting.
Legal aid. Hold on. Legal aid is literally.
I'm going to take us on to the next part of the meeting, which is about the conduct, of the public, hearings.
Richard, you're falling on our deaf ears. You're telling us you want to hear what we are.
And you've had your opportunity, sir, to tell us this evening about what you think. I'm now going to move us on to the next part of the meeting, which is about resident hearings.
But hold on a minute.
Could I ask?
No, I haven't. No. Yeah, more than enough. And what about legal aid?
Okay, I'm going to move us on to talk about public hearings.
No, it's an old piece.
Could I invite? Could I first of all invite members of the Commission who...
This is a public meeting. I don't care if the rest of the grey-haired old flub don't want to think. You don't understand in 20 years' time, most of you are going to be a sick under. Me as a 34-year-old is going to be living with the decisions you lot make.
Sir, could I ask you to, having made your...
Respect, when you come to my state, you're going to have most of black, Muslim and Somali who are going to be taking 20 minutes to
Okay.
You're being disruptive now.
No, I'm not, because if you ain't going to listen to me, you ain't going to listen to them people on my estate.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I think we must not allow ourselves to be put off by this, so I think we should suspend the meeting for 5 minutes and then come back in 5 minutes' time.
Thanks, will get louder. Yes, it will happen.
About the public hearings, about the ones that the Commission has had and what's been covered, and also to preview what's still to come. And I wonder if I could just start off by asking one of the resident members of the Commission to give their reflections on the hearings that we've had so far, and perhaps in doing that you might pick up the comment that was made earlier about the times that they were held and so on and so forth. If you could, who would like to have a go at that? Lorna, would you like to?
Hello, hi. Hello, Sue. Yes, the times of the hearings, it's a tricky one. Most of us are own work as well, so we struggle to get there. I think whatever time of day, it's going to be difficult to get everybody who wants to be there. I think it's nice that people make the effort to come along when they can. In terms of the hearings, it's been really useful to get very different perspectives from both tenants, professionals, different parties involved in the issues that we've come across. and it's just the scope of information has been really interesting, and being able to think about things from several different perspectives. For me, I come away with more questions always, and I think we have discussions about what direction we think may go in. But again, personally, I haven't made any conclusions myself. I'm just listening to the evidence, and again, maybe reflecting on some of the questions that will come out. With any housing option that we may go with, there's going to be a million other questions we have to consider in the way any policy is going to be rolled out. Each part of the puzzle impacts on another part. So even if we were to say stock transfer, that may have a million implications as to how that actually looks when we actually make a decision in that direction. If we chose to go for a TMO, that's going to have a number of different implications as to how that may eventually look as well. I've been really impressed by the level of witnesses in terms of residents as well. And that, for me, has given me a real insight. And a lot of the issues are pertinent to us as tenants as well. I think we've all got our hearts in trying to come up with a solution that's really positive and really reflects the needs of the residents. And for me, it's about trying to get as many views from people as possible and their perspectives. And that's why it's really important that people have come here today. Thank you.
Lorna, thank you very much for that. And I think Anthony wanted to add a few thoughts to that.
Yeah. The first words and they come out like that. I agree with what Lorna said. I think what the part of it, when she mentioned the puzzles, I think for me, it's been about putting pieces together, very much so. And it's a new concept for us to actually have a public hearing where we call witnesses and people are invited, residents are invited, and they don't have the chance to speak. But I think for the residents, especially the ones who've come to most of them, I think they've all found it very interesting to actually listen to hear what's said, just as we're listening to hear what the experts are saying. And it all goes towards putting the puzzle in place to enable us to build a complete picture so that when we come to make a recommendation, we've taken all the professional advice and comments into account, as well as residents' comments as well. And I think it's very important. I've been fascinated by the way the hearings have worked. For me, they've, as Lorna said, they've sent me away asking more questions. And that's good, because I don't think if we stop asking questions, we're on a downward slope, and I think we need to keep asking questions all the time. And I think the hearings have given us a chance not only to ask questions of the experts, if you like, but also to come away and ask ourselves more questions.
Okay, I'll come to questions in just a second, if I may. Before doing that, could I just ask Peter to give a little preview of the delights that are to come in the hearings that we haven't yet had?
Thanks, Mike. I wonder if I should just preface that by explaining why the hearings have themes. We realised when we embarked on this that people's housing within the borough means many different things, and people get really concerned about different aspects of their housing. And when we as a commission are looking at the strengths and weaknesses of different options, we have to balance those strengths and weaknesses across a wide range of different considerations within housing. So we've tried to make the hearings digestible by splitting them into themes. So as you'll be aware, we looked at housing services, we've looked at investment, we've looked at rents and service charges, we've looked at tenant rights, we've looked at regeneration and how we can develop new housing supply. And we've done that because those themes are all hugely important when we come to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the different options. The three hearings to come are in a sense bring us to a sort of climax of the issues that affect housing. So the next one I've already mentioned, which is on Thursday, is around resident involvement and what the different options present in terms of opportunities for resident involvement, how that works currently, how it works in other organisations, what do residents expect, and are there different ways of enabling residents to be involved and have an influence over things without necessarily having to come to meetings, give up their evenings, or be the slave of the timetable of bodies like the Commission. So there's a wide range of issues around resident involvement on Thursday, and then the next one on the 7th of July, we'll start looking in more detail at some of the ownership and management options, which have all had some airtime tonight. Tenant management, for example, what are the models of tenant management that might apply if the council stays, if the stock stays with the council? What are the options for tenant management if the stock transfers? And then if the stock were to transfer, what are some of the ownership options that would yield genuine tenant control over the organisation that takes ownership of the stock? So that's the 8th hearing on the 7th of July. And then the final hearing on Saturday, the 11th of July, is more of a kind of process hearing, because if there is going to be a change, whether a change to a new form of retention or a change to a new organisation via a stock transfer, what would be the implementation steps? What would be involved in actually making the change happen? How would you bring the new organisation into play? What would be the implications for tenants, for staff, for leaseholders, for members? What are the key decisions that would need to be taken? So we hope to conclude, having rehearsed across all of the hearings, a great many of the issues that we will then need to return to via the resident engagement programme later on during the summer. And what we hope, if I can remind people of what Shirley said at the beginning, the public hearings are an opportunity to put these issues in the public forum and start a debate. They were never intended to be the place where the debate was closed down or a conclusion arrived at. The conclusion is further down the line later on this year when the Commission has to bring all this together and make a recommendation.
Thank you very much, Peter. Do we have some questions about the hearings and how they've been conducted and what's still to come? Question there from gentleman. Yes, please.
Okay, right. Now, just 1 second, Mr. Chairman. You did have the authority to ask that gentleman to leave for disrupting the meeting. Right. Now, my main question is that, as regards to sheltered housing, how does that fare with the organisation? I think that would come under Anthony's jurisdiction, I don't know. Or perhaps, perhaps Keith, I don't know.
Okay, that's not a question strictly about the hearings, but nevertheless it's a very important question. Does somebody briefly want to deal with how sheltered housing would fit into this? Yes, please. Just.
I'm going to support what Ray says. By the way, my name's Marilyn. I'm the chair of sheltered housing. I don't think. Yes, you do. We can't hear you. You can't hear me. Okay. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. To quantify what my friend has said there, with sheltered housing, how far have you gone into gathering evidence? I know that you've been to Michael Stewart House and gathered some information there from having a residents' meeting. But how many sheltered housing units have you actually attempted to have meetings with residents at this stage? I do know that I've got the commissioners on the agenda and that Tom will be at a sheltered housing forum on the 7th at about 3 p.m. and then you've got your hearing at 5:30. So I just wondered how far you've gone into the sheltered housing, because the concerns with sheltered housing residents are their tenancy rights and who will, when it comes, they always jump to the voting. There's lots of Chinese whispers everywhere, but your handbook came out just at the right time. And when the July one comes out, please do a little bit more work on what is happening with sheltered housing and the evidence that you gather there, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. Would somebody like to just to pick that up?
Thanks, Marilyn, but thanks, Ray. There are two aspects to this, I think, really. One is the condition of the housing stock itself and how the council is to deal with that, or maybe we will have some ideas about how to deal with that. And that will emerge through the stock condition survey, which Savills have been carrying out, as you know, and they've taken, as I think probably some of you here will have had a visit by the Savills surveyors, and what they're doing is taking a sample of all of the properties and all of the typical properties in the borough to make really an estimate as to their condition, what needs to be done to them, what the financial implications are over time of that kind of work. And that will be, that sheltered housing is included in that, Marilyn, and I would expect that to throw up some specific observations about the physical condition of sheltered housing in the borough. Then there's the second issue, equally important, of the rights and interests and concerns, and I think we are moving towards doing some work on that. You mentioned the meeting on the 7th. I think I'm scheduled to come to a meeting on the 14th. That is in my diary, and I think actually there is a desire amongst commissioners to do actually some visits. I'd like to do some visits to sheltered housing. So I think one way or another, we have got it firmly in our sights. And of course, you couldn't have a better, more articulate spokesman on behalf of sheltered housing than the person I'm about to hand over to, namely Mr. Anthony Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, not Chair, sorry, Keith. Just to go back on what Marion said about visits, TPAS have made 8 visits to different shelter schemes. I've attended 6 of them. I'm intending to visit all the remaining ones with TPAS to talk to tenants about how the Commission is looking at their concerns and how the outcome of the Commission's findings will affect sheltered housing. I've lived in sheltered housing for 5 years, and in that time, I think we all know, those of us who live in sheltered housing, that we've suffered massive cutbacks in frontline staff, I think 40% in the last 4 years. And certainly listening to what residents say, they're obviously concerned about their schemes, because when there was a stock appraisal a few years ago, again, you mentioned Chinese whispers. The whispers were that they were going to sell us off to, pass us over to a housing association, when in fact that wasn't the case, but lack of information. I think the other thing is that residents are concerned about the level of support they're getting from housing officers, and the fact that due to the cutbacks, they do not see their housing officers or their scheme managers, sometimes for only about half an hour a day. So there's underfunding, there's under-resourcing within sheltered housing. Now, one of the things I think the Commission, if there is a move for stock transfer, for example, I think part of that should be looking at how sheltered housing, but also not just sheltered housing, but how housing for older people living in the borough can be improved, because we've got an ageing population. The size of the population of people over 65 is going to increase quite steadily, and we need to look at how people who want to stay in their own homes, older people who want to stay in their homes, can be supported without the need to go into care homes. Most people, older people, want to stay in their homes, and sheltered housing is one option, but there are also people who want to stay where they are, and I think we need to look at how they can be resourced. I think sheltered housing definitely needs to be resourced. It's not, the management of sheltered housing needs a major look at. We've got a small number of resources, short-term resources coming on stream. It's like putting sticking plaster on a wound. It needs major surgery. And I think the outcome of the Commission, whatever we decide, whether it's stock retention or stock transfer, will hopefully open up the possibilities for sheltered housing and housing for older people being treated much more seriously and given the resources it needs.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anthony. I'm going to move us on to towards the end of the meeting now, because it's time is drawing on. And before asking Keith to wind up by talking about next steps, could I just ask if there are any resident members of the Commission who'd like to make any comments about the significance of resident involvement in the Commission and the importance of that involvement going forward? Would anybody like to summarise their thoughts about that?
Sorry, it's me again. When I first heard about this commission, I was hugely relieved and quite impressed that it was going to be a residents' commission. And when I found out more about it, I was sort of even more impressed, because it became apparent that it was going to be a majority of residents on the commission, and that it was going to represent leaseholders and tenants, sheltered housing, and we are here to do our best to represent all tenants, tenants and leaseholders, but obviously individually we're not you. But I think us being here, for me, feels as if there is not anything going on behind closed doors. We had a long period of time where it felt like things were being done to us in this borough, and it is a refreshing change for me, and I hope for other people to not feel like things are being done to us, but with us. It's part of a wider thing, really, which is that I think residents' involvement generally in the borough has got a new lease of life. I mean, there's actually a team of people now, there wasn't before, and they're very active in going out, and there are new TRA starting. I know, Jackie and other people who are here, they are involved in new TRAs. And so I think the Residents' Commission, although it's entirely separate from those things, it's sort of alongside and part of something new. So for me, it's really hard work, and it is quite daunting. There's a huge amount of information to understand and synthesize, but I think that the model that's being used as well is really useful, because it does feel as if we're being supported but not directed, if that makes sense. So we're being enabled to actually understand and come to make our own minds up about things. And I guess the only other thing I want to say is that it's been a pleasure for me actually meeting the other commissioners and getting to know people. And I actually do think that the interviewing panel did a really good job of recruiting a really diverse group of people, actually. So I think that's also something to be optimistic about, really, in terms of the future. So that's enough from me. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything.
I mean, this is our borough, isn't it? And we all live here, and we're all committed to it in various ways. So, although we're all part of the commission, I think we need to commit to actually making this a collective decision. And it's great that people are here and want to be heard. And use your voice, and we're here to help you do that as well as best we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lorna. Keith, could I turn to you finally, and should we take just a question here first?
One question.
Thank you. Yes, please.
You see how you want to put the elderly tenants. You know how you've been getting the elderly tenants' views. When they have the elderly people, partners younger than them, and they need to go into sheltered housing, what happens then?
Thanks for that, Agnes. We'll be, as far as I understood the question, it was, are we going into the sheltered housing? Well, the answer is yes. We're going to talk to people there, and the point about the Commission is that we are concerned for all ages and all generations. And I speak as the oldest member of the commission, so so I'm certainly concerned about the oldest generation. I give you that assurance. Can I just say this then, in summary and finality? And it's something I say, and I apologise if you heard it before, when we do our public hearings to explain the background to the thing, that actually what this commission, your commission, is doing is something which has been done scores of times, hundreds of times, up and down the country, when people have wanted to look at the future of housing in boroughs. And it's called a Housing Strategy Stock Options Appraisal. And so there's nothing new about what we do. We look at the legal aspects, we look at the governance aspects, we look at the financial aspects, we look at the condition of the housing and what needs to be done to improve it. But there is one unique thing about what is happening here in your borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. Because normally these stock options appraisals are carried out by council officers with experts behind closed door. Nothing sinister about it, but that's actually how it normally happens. But here in Hammersmith and Fulham, as you can see, it is being done in the full glare of openness and publicity, because we were determined from the word go that we wanted to demonstrate this was an honest, a transparent, a decent and proper process. And I very much hope that this meeting has contributed to that. And we will conclude our public hearings to receive evidence in July. It's possible that we will have a further one to present our findings to you in due course, but we're thinking about that. But in terms of the timetable, we expect to conclude our inquiries and to make our recommendation to the council at the very end of September. We would then anticipate, but it's up to the council, that in October, probably in November, the council would debate this matter and come to its own decision as to the future. If it is a decision about retention, that is to say that the housing remains with the council, well, as I say, that's straightforward, but that's a situation we're all used to. If, however, they go in the direction of a local Hammersmith and Fulham Housing Association, which I think is probably, if we are to make a stock transfer recommendation, the route that we would want to go down, then that becomes subject to very detailed requirements of the law. And as I indicated earlier, the whole process of providing you with maximum information, having further meetings and consultations to absolutely demonstrate to all of the interested parties, which will be the Greater London Authority, this will be after Boris, I suspect, to the government, but that'll still be with the Conservative government, that everything has been done absolutely properly and according to the letter of the law, and that could take a period of 12 months or more. So actually, if there is a proposal for a transfer, then you may well find that you're voting in 12 to 18 months' time. So that's the kind of timetable that you can expect. Obviously, as I said also earlier, ample time for more reflection, more consideration, more collecting of information, and more discussion between yourselves, but also between you and your elected representatives as well.
Thank you, Keith. Just before we finish the meeting, can I just say one thing, which is that I've spent a bit of time with the people at the top table here, Keith, and the independent commissioners and the resident commissioners, and I think they're doing an amazing job, and they are putting a colossal amount of their own time and energy and caring into this process. So I wonder whether it would be appropriate for us to thank them at this stage for the effort that they're putting in. And just to finish, thanks very much for coming out on a warm, sticky evening and for seeing it through to the end of what's been quite a long and at one point quite exciting meeting. Thanks for the questions that thanks for the questions that you've asked. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please carry on participating fully in this very important enterprise. Ray, one last point.
I see on the agenda you've got any other business.
Yes.
I just wondered, earlier on we heard that we're going to do a survey on what people actually think of this. When you've actually done the survey, the thing that worried people the most, it all lights up for you, and we'd better have some sort of meeting on that, on the thing that was really worrying people, because I've got an idea there could be two things that are worrying people all the time, or we could have a meeting to discuss it.
Yeah, I think we can guarantee there will be more consultation along those lines, Ray. So thanks very much for raising that point. And at that point, thanks very much for coming, and the meeting is closed.